welcome to the panel. I figured just to get us started off, I'll have everybody go through and give a quick introduction of themselves, what their company does, and like what specialty. So I was just asking them, what type of wallet are you? EOA, smart contract. In one case, we actually have an infrastructure provider as well. So I'll have everybody introduce themselves and a little bit about their company and what they work on. You want to kick us off, Migu?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Migu. From Alpha Wallet. Alpha Wallet is one product from Smart Token Labs. In Smart Token Labs, we build smart tokens where tokens can function across different websites. And we have the other technology called TokenScript, which I will mention as part of when it touches the wallet.
Hi, I apologize, I lost my voice, but I've been here a few days already, so the networking took its toll. We at Empire Wallet are building a smart contract self-studio wallet that has some amazing features like paying for gas and stablecoins, prepaying for gas, batching transactions, all that account abstraction goodness that we have been talking about.
Cool. So hi, I work at Credo. Credo is a self-custody infrastructure provider. So to make it more simple, effectively provide custodial services. We integrate with wallets.
Thank you very much. So just to cover a summary of kind of the topics that we're planning to cover today. So I've got about 3 different topics with a few different questions for each one. Primarily focused on account abstraction first, and then we'll talk about coordination between different parties. So the wallet to dApp API interactions and the way that the different wallets face these types of problems. And then finally, we'll cover something about responsibility, talking on the topic of FTX and how they had to have some responsibility with it. So, looking at the framing of what responsibility do self-custody wallets have as well. So to kick us off here, we'll start with what do you guys believe still needs to be done in order to get account abstraction implemented, either for your wallet or for the ecosystem as a whole?
Well, in the case of smart contract wallets like Empire, if you allow me the joke, look at me, I'm the account abstraction. So there's nothing that we need to do to implement because smart contract wallets are smart account abstraction. The only thing that is standing between us and general adoption is, in my opinion, EIP 1271, smart contract signature validation. A lot of the apps and a lot of platforms still do not support that, and I think that will become a standard as soon as 4.3.7 kicks. So I think that's what we need to do, adopt EIP 1271.
Will you want to take that as well?
So we have been plotting this since 4 years ago, but we decided to not do anything until the relative ERC, in this case, 1271, is valid and approach accepted by the world market. I think what it will enable us is to make wallets compete on their way of managing security. So let's say different wallets can innovate in different ways. So the first thing we want to do is to have a few protocols. For example, if you want to withdraw $1 million instead of just $1,000, you will have to cool down period of 5 hours in which the other key can challenge you, like a backup key can challenge you, like whether or not it was still the correct owner owning the wallet. This kind of thing is our model that we learn from users' needs. I'm pretty sure every wallet learned from something from their users' needs. Once this is going to be, once this battlefield opens, there will be competition. And there will be lots of new interesting ideas, and everybody will think, why we haven't done this 5 years ago?
And speaking on that, Julian, for you guys.
I mean, what I'm hearing is there's a common thread there, which is I think adoption is going to be sort of premised on UX being sorted out. So you're describing kind of specific UX use cases there. And I think that's what it comes down to. When it comes to account abstraction, everyone's going to be a Solidity developer, right? So I think that the wallet providers and custodians need to provide an interface that actually satisfies user needs to kind of for deployment. The fact is that actually you've got plenty of inspiration to get from the industry at large, right? So if you look at the advanced policy engines in most custodians today, obviously you've got the central counterparty there. For us, it's a bit different because we have a decentralized MPC network, but nevertheless, like what adoption is kind of premised on still, in my opinion, is can we create the right UX to satisfy the needs of users that are not going to be that sophisticated.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that kind of hits at the core needs of the problem as well, which is really like taking a look at like the UX and trying to address the problem from the user perspective rather than from the technical perspective, which leads into the next question pretty well, which is, with account abstraction, what problems do you expect to leave behind in these new wallets, and like what sort of like different UX paradigms do you expect to emerge because of that account abstraction layer? Now that we're considering the UX and the change in the way that developers engage.
Okay.
Yeah.
So first thing the user will notice is that the transactions are not entirely controlled by the dApp. So there will be a time when the wallet takes up the space, communication, halfway, say, hey, the website wants to make a transaction, this is what I'm asking to do. Different smart contracts will ask for different things. Maybe you need 2 out of 3 to confirm. Maybe you need, let's say, 5 hours of cooldown time. So user will get used to the idea that part of the security is not offered by dApp, but offered by the wallet. This is crucial because once this is done, you can go to the next step, which is abstract tokens. So once you have the wallet account abstracted, next step is how do you fit token knowledge into the wallet so that when the website asks for a token to do something, the token do the things in the wallet and tell the website the result. This is crucial because this allows token to be used on all websites, Web 2 websites, Web 3 websites, 10,000 websites, and not just the few websites that you already trust, such as OpenSea.
Awesome. And Vanina, for you, like this is a very interesting question. I'll reframe it a little bit because I know you come from a marketing background. How do you imagine that we need to market these different paradigms to users now that we're changing it in order to convey the security properties in an effective way?
Sorry. Well, that's the thing. We don't need to market them. We don't need to market the infrastructure. We don't need to market the underlying complexity. We just need to market the benefits that users get from what we're actually building. And I think that's just our responsibility as builders to really hide all of that complexity under the code. The one thing I'm actually really excited about when it comes to account abstraction is the possibility to kill the seed phrase. Because just now I saw the tweet. I wasn't in the talk, sadly. Somebody from Argent said, we spent like a few years teaching our mothers not to write passwords on pieces of paper. And now all of a sudden, Web3, we're like, here's the phrase, write it on a piece of paper. And that's just bad UX. That's just bad UX. And also that bad UX is responsible for maybe half of the security issues that people face when interacting with the wallet, especially their beginners, especially that they're just making their first steps in crypto. So yeah, at the end of the day, what we need to tell people as marketers, is not, hey, we use account abstraction, we support this EIP or that ERC. You need to tell people, if you lose your account, you can break up. As simple as
one example of such use case would be, let's say we don't ask user for seed phrase at all. We ask user to provide an email address. And then a new seed phrase is created. We don't ask user to backup. No app, no backup. Next time when you have a new installation, you need to have a few trusted tester to attest that you have access to the email address together with the proof of your ownership of the newly generated Ethereum address. And supposedly, all of the tokens you still own can be transferred to the new wallet, a new Ethereum address controlled by the new Ethereum address, and without the ERC can be transferred. And you don't need to even remember secrets.
Yeah, awesome. And Julian, for you guys, with the MPC side of it and the interactions that you guys bring into it, obviously, that creates some sort of like can be competitive or it can be collaborative, as I've heard you all put it. So I'm curious to get your take on the UX impacts of what MPC can bring in terms of like a collaborative environment with it stuff.
On collaboration, I'm a bit undecided at this point. I think on the one hand, it's for us specifically, it's a great validation of the product that we've built, right? Because we do have all the features that you guys are describing, the benefits that the users are describing. it goes back to this whole notion of kind of sophisticated policy engines, allowing people to have a sophisticated way to kind of manage their risk, I suppose, when it comes to actually getting their assets out of their wallets. And we're doing that well at the moment, like both from a UX and security standpoint, by using an MPC. But I think that where I'm optimistic about future collaboration and what could happen is that with that new standard, it's also completely untethered, right? Like anyone actually who wants to play around with this and actually deploy kind of abstraction just needs to be a sort of deep coder. So I think that in crypto, like there's this also that we know now, where like which we can be reapplied from the current environments into AA. But there's all the stuff that we haven't even conceived of that this new environment is going to untether. And that's super exciting. I think it comes with a pound of flesh, because that means a lot of smart contracts in the wild that can be exploited potentially as well. But nevertheless, like I think that we're like quietly optimistic, slightly on the fence on like exactly how we're going to basically play around with a kind of abstraction.
Yeah, that makes sense. And kind of like touching on this, because there's such a diversity of like different ways that we can approach this concept of a wallet. And like one of the things that account abstraction is trying to bring into play is how are we going to unify this in a certain aspect for dApp developers and stuff. What sort of breaking changes do you guys expect to occur for dApp developers who are utilizing or interacting with your wallet along the way? So, Vanina, let's have you start off with that question.
Well, at the end of the day, the dApp developer doesn't really care if it's a legal wallet or a smart contract wallet. It's just a wallet. It's up to the wallet to implement the compatibility standards that we are all talking about, and to make sure that we are creating not an isolated, like tiny ecosystem or nanosystem or whatever, but rather building for a greater space and a greater industry. Because to be honest, right now I feel like we're all children on the playground, and somebody has dropped a box of new toys, and everybody has a toy, and everybody's like sharing the toys, and we're asking each other, hey, did you know that this could do this or that? And this is something that is extremely valuable to us as builders, and we should really continue that momentum and make sure that we collaborate to make sure that dApps developer have a much easier job implementing and interacting with wallets.
Yeah, awesome. Julian, what about your take on this? Because you guys don't directly interact with dApps, actually, so I'm very interested to get your take.
I think that I take your point. I think they like three the wallets, basically dApps will adapt to wallets because they want access to the wallets users. Like it's a bit more nuanced than this. I think like there's also like wallets will sort of flock towards dApps which have got meaningful TVLs because they want to capture. So I think that you always have this sense of competition, or at least this kind of migration towards like where's the liquidity, and like whether you measure it as TVL or whether you measure it as number of users, like it will have this gravitational pull on whether we're talking about the wallet providers or the dApps.
Yep.
So I'm more of a yet again, I feel like I'm sitting on the fence way too much today, but I think the nuance is really there, right? It's like I think the adaptation comes both ways, and what you do observe is that in the current environment, it's also quite oligopolistic, right? Like you've got some of the wallet providers are extremely dominant, and some of the dApps do siphon up most of the TVL, and I think that's a natural occurrence. But like where I think that like the impact of AA and opening up kind of things in this way could be positive is that suddenly things become a bit more interoperable, where basically actually the movement of liquidity is a bit more seamless, then maybe that actually opens up like more areas of innovation and growth for more dApps, more wallets as well.
Yeah.
I was actually just going to say, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but like,
Go ahead.
the point that you made, yeah, for example, MetaMask is like one of the most popular wallets, so most dApps would be gearing towards leaning towards building MetaMask compatible dApps, right? And then once we have 4.3.7 kick in, and we have those standards like set in place and established, then it will really help products and wallets compete on their own merit and not on existing user base that happen for one reason or another. Sometimes just circumstance, sometimes lack of competition at a certain stage of their development. So I think that this will sort of even the playing field.
I could live with that. I think that right now it's a bit of an awkward dialectic, right? What that basically, MetaMask, because of the gravitational pull that sets a standard that is de facto, that is influencing the dapps. But likewise, and I think you made a presentation earlier today, which illustrated that really well. When Uniswap adopted one of the standard V3 of whatever standard we're talking about, actually that also forced MetaMask's hands to adopt this. So I think that when I'm talking about the dialectic, there is this innovation comes about. This year, the next guy to actually adopt the next standard, depending on the actual market positioning, is going to have an outsized impact on how the ecosystem as a whole has to react.
Yep. And for you, Vivo, since you are a EOA implementer, I guess the first question, I haven't looked at your guys' implementation. Have you guys been forced to copy MetaMask's standard? And what has been the impacts for that? So have you guys gone with the EIP 1193 implementation of it? Or where are you guys at?
Okay, so one example is implementation of zero-knowledge proof of the user key.
Okay.
So it's possible to produce zero-knowledge proof without user signing any message because user hesitate to sign. We want to solve this problem. But that would require some breaking changes.
Yep.
And we don't think we can lead the breaking change because despite being the most forked open source wallet, our actual market share is not the greatest. It seems majority of the market actually didn't use open source wallet. Please use ours. And so we decided to talk to MetaMask, but it was a lot of people to talk to. It turns out to be. So eventually we couldn't do this.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's a perfect lead into our next question about coordination between parties, which I'll frame up the question first, and then we'll kind of be more specific on it. How does monoculture of wallets and dapps affect the ability to improve security within the ecosystem? So, with these dominant dapps that we have today and dominant wallets as well, so things like MetaMask, things like Phantom, and different ecosystems and stuff, effectively these dominant places have, forced us to have to implement in certain particular ways. And as Julian pointed out, it goes both ways. And I think this is where the question of how do browsers, interact with that, and how are we actually repeating the same problem come into play? So to frame this for you first, Weibo, how are you guys wanting to improve security? You mentioned needing to do zero-knowledge proofs, but unable to because you're unable to coordinate between different other wallet apps.
That's true.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I think I take an evolutionary view. So if we couldn't change the world for the better, it's okay. Because maybe we are not evolved to that point. so for our view, because we are a tokenization company, we have had this view for a long time, that we believe the true power of blockchain comes from tokenization. That means that companies and individuals can tokenize their assets, their products, their services, their privilege or whatever, and allow them to be used on the blockchain to achieve two things. First, it allows frictionless access to market. So anything you have in your ecosystem, in your app, if you don't tokenize it, it's only living in Siri, it's only living in Google Pay, and it won't be accessing the greater market. The second is you have a limitation on integration. So many apps work better if they are integrated, but there are only so many integrations that can be done. So if you can put everything into token, then there will be more integration. That's our view, and we call our tokenization company because of that. So I think that the real breakthrough is evolutionary, where after the NFT, people come to understand token has value and it can be individualized. And then the next stage, we will see commercial companies to adopt this technology to tokenize their product and services. By the time they do this, they will have a problem. The problem being that their tokenized product, being it car ownership or movie ticket, needs to go to the other website to be integrated to access new markets. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to tokenize it. In order to access other markets, they need to have their token code bundled to work on different people's website. Then we have a problem that we have multi-domain website, which is the website serves you, but some of the code from the token come from the other websites. And you have to create security boundary, you have to make a token executable, All these things will drive innovation. And previously, the barriers will no longer be a barrier because it's a whole new paradigm going on. So we are going to identify the paradigm, and we're going to provide technology to go with that.
Okay, so the way I interpreted that is effectively it's your belief in the framing that the concept around tokenization standards and on-chain data models are actually the way in which we should be standardizing rather than the APIs. I'm curious to get your take on this, Julian, because I saw you giving a few interesting expressions over there. So I'm curious to get your take. How does that impact the way in which you operate if we move to more of a data model interoperability layer, which is kind of more of the ceramic style thinking of let's get composability at the data layer rather than let's get composability at the API layer, which aligns more with arbitrary NPC signatures and things of that nature?
I thought we agreed that you'd not be asking me this question, but that's fine. I think that for us, like when we're thinking about like basically moving this entire security construct into the smart contract space, where I'd be ambivalent that like it kind of goes back into I think the debate around the kind of standards that we apply to this on a broader level, and this is also the point at which I think we get a bit concerned, especially relative to the kind of maturity in the industry, about how robust that looks. Because on the one hand, it's awesome to have all that composability, but if there's no accepted standard or even like simply like widely understood kind of DevOps process to actually secure audits and upgrade smart contracts, then yeah, it's awesome to basically like unleash that activity in the market, but you've got a lot of potentially really shitty smart contracts in the wild that could actually lead to some bad outcomes. And I think that if you look at what happened last year in DeFi, like the soft targets in the market have really been at that level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly why I wanted to ask you the question, because I knew that you had strong opinions, so I want to bring those out.
I want to just refer to a story of early internet where people, in the RFC, in the IETF, there was a discussion on whether or not we should build in SSL into the protocol called IPsec. And the idea was if you don't build in and allow people just pass information clear text, then there will be $300 million of loss in value of the stolen assets, stolen password. And that will hurt the industry and the internet will be hurt. And in the end, it was not taken. And actually, it's not $300 million. It's roughly $30 billion lost due to not implementing SSL, to the point where now everybody has SSL. So the market paid a huge price for not implementing the right technology with the prudence in the beginning. But then again, you cannot beat the market. After $30 billion being wasted, we are having better security after all.
I agree with that. And so like, I love to kind of like steam out my own counter arguments for some reason, but like what I'm describing now is like today's concern relative to the maturity of the market, right? I think that if you like look ahead in 12 months, 18 months from now, I think once, and when we talk about standards, I think like what we're really talking about is like actually how people understand they need to operate to scale responsibly. Once I think that we've grown a bit more mature in that context, then like I'm a permanent optimist about actually what I can deliver. Yeah, but in the meantime, I'm looking at like the next 12 months, like let's assume that suddenly like account abstraction is fully shipped in production and basically available to all of us without, I think, having taken a pause on even the last year. Like if you look at the DeFi hacks from last year and like thinking clearly about how not to replicate this, I just think we're just opening ourselves up for a bit of more pain, at least in the short term. And maybe that's the cost of actually getting to where we need to be.
Yep. And looking at the time, I'm going to move forward a little bit to jump to responsibility because I think there's some interesting concepts here. So for you, Vanina, since you guys have done the smart contract wallet for a bit now, and you guys have ventured down that path for a bit, obviously you've been faced with kind of some different patterns and different interactions and things of that nature. And so with that, to what extent do you think wallet developers are responsible for users' assets through the development of UX experience and other general secure software development lifecycles?
I mean, it depends whether you're asking me from a purely legal standpoint or a philosophical one. Because from a legal perspective, we're not responsible.
That's why I asked 6 questions, because we all want to play it like hot potato. So
I am. First of all, I'm too pretty for jail. Second of all, that's a non-custodial, self-custodial wallet. So, at the end of the day, we're trying to build for people to assume that custody and take back that responsibility over their own assets. But then also, we need to be very, very aware of all the potential pitfalls and all the potential spots where users can actually, user needs to be protected from themselves.
awesome.
So at the end of the day, I think it's a matter that from a philosophical point of view, we should be responsible. We should be doing our very best to protect users from malicious parties and from themselves. But again, if anybody asks, legally not responsible.
Yeah, and that's what I'd expect every company's lawyer to tell us as well. So, which is a perfect setup for this other question I'll frame to both Julian and Weibo. Should we consider ourselves fiduciaries because we control the experience and the software libraries chosen for the users? Julian?
Like to double down on your point, like when we start using like words like fiduciary, that's effectively a legal term, right? So I think that responsibility is enshrined in the kind of contractual relationship you have with your user.
Yep.
And if or it's actually also enshrined in whatever regulation you sort of subjected to.
Yep.
But going back to your point, but there's a philosophical underpinning there, which is we are entrusted by our users to secure the assets, to actually give them the right tooling as well and the right level of governance to deploy those assets. So the nuance there is important because I think at some point that you can actually do the tools and you can actually do all the education and the caveating required to saying like this is best practice and this is the tools that we're providing you guys to actually help you with that. That I think goes a very long way to demonstrating that we've met our obligations with the users. And I think we're always going to push further in that direction and to ensure that's clearly stipulated and clearly communicated. But I think when we start talking about fiduciary duty, like this is a legal construct that has its own weights in itself, and that's a function of, like I said, contract and regulation.
I think fiduciary is an idea rather than if we apply legal here, it's going to be very difficult to talk about. And so we are not going to implement smart contract wallet immediately. Mm-hmm. And we have been holding on for quite a few years, although we have a lot of whiteboard session over this and different ways to secure users' funds, like a 5-hour delay I mentioned before. Yep. We're not in a hurry to do that because we felt responsible. Mm-hmm. But eventually, every company try to do their best to make best for their customers as well, as their long-term gain. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be evolutionary rather than legal.
Yeah. And that's the way I generally expect it to go. In general, like when I think about these things, the way I've heard it best described, if you were to look at the concept of fiduciary within the financial services sector, they effectively wrote themselves into a corner in terms of regulation. And so I think that's largely why our industry wants to avoid this as a whole. But that's also why I asked the question, is because the concept stands strong when it's like, Vanina points out, we don't need to explain these things to them. We just need to tell them it's secure and it's possible. Well, what happens when we fail? And that's the question that happened with FTX.
And I don't mind the weight of the obligation, like if we're going to be talking about the legal side of things at all. Yep. I think, like, if anything, I'd welcome it in most instances, by the way. Yep. But I just think that it is also clear to have that delineation in mind when we're talking about the business that we're in. Yep. The reality is that, if tomorrow Credo had massive hack, all the assets were actually taken from the platform and the user assets, now we don't have a business anymore. There is so there is, I'm not trying to wiggle ourselves out of sort of demonstrating that this complete alignment with the users. Quite the opposite. Yep. I think that it is essential to kind of think about our users first, and when they think about us, they think about how we secure the assets on their behalf.
Yep. Well, and I think that brings up another interesting question that I had. So we'll step back to it. Who is actually responsible for security when it comes to things like the user experience and the APIs itself between the wallets and the dapps? Because obviously it's a shared responsibility in certain regard. If you think about the Connect API, that was defined originally by MetaMask, and then now it's ubiquitous in terms of its capabilities in the dapps today. So let's say Connect breaks. Who's responsible? Is it a coordinated effort between us all? And is that what makes it so that wallets aren't solely responsible for users? Or is it something where it's like, it's actually the dapps fault?
I think case by case entirely. I think that it's depending on where the attack factors happen and what's broken, it really comes down to like the dApp or the wallet. If you look at the tax on the ecosystem that we've seen last year with all the with hacks and wallet drainage, you could basically probably cut it in half, like 50-50, whether you could blame primarily a wallet or a dApp around what happened. With dApps, obviously, it's more visible because you get like a whole pool being drained, and that's big numbers right away, and you've got a whole community of users that are affected. With wallet drainage, it's a bit different. But like, I would still say that those two participants in the ecosystem are so tied at the hip that I think that any problem-solving effort should be really the focus of collaboration.
Yep. And I'm curious to get both of your takes as well. So,
I absolutely agree because, again, from a legal perspective, what happens when we fail and when an attack happens, user assets are affected? Yeah, we're not liable, but we're out of business. So it is in our best interest to collaborate and make sure that this just doesn't happen.
Yep.
So I think that the more important question here is not whether we collaborate, but when we collaborate. And the answer here is before we fuck up.
I like that. And what's your take on this?
Traditionally, wallets consider themselves similar to banks. So if you send money to someone, I don't care. If you didn't send money to someone, but your money is lost, I have a problem. So that's traditional way, like the wallet is the account holder. I think evolutionary force will drive wallet to do more. I think that eventually, let's say if you transfer if you burn the ERC20 token on the dApp, and the user will ask why the wallet allows me to burn that token. And you can see the dApp give the instruction to burn that token, but that's not sufficient because user will say that your token is sitting in my wallet. And it didn't say anything. I'm burning a token. Mm-hmm. So this urge of protecting token instead of account is going to be stronger and stronger as token gets richer in functionalities and portability and composability. So eventually, wallet has to shoulder the responsibility of joining the secure zone to protect tokens and even generate token transactions themselves instead of blindly following websites to create transaction. And that's where we are heading. And that's why we created token script technology, which I mentioned earlier, to allow scripts to be tokened by the issuer and run a secure environment in the wallet, because we see that's where evolution will take us to.
Yep. And to round this out, I've got two essential questions that come here. Framing it up in the perspective of browser wars, to go back to the title, the concept of browsers themselves have been faced with this exact question. This is where the term user agent came into play. I don't know if anybody's decided to get bored and read mailing lists from 20 years ago, but I have.
I'm very glad this term didn't change. 10 years ago, it's the same term.
Yep. So the term agent was specifically chosen because the browser is acting on behalf of the user. And that's where they came up with the concept of user agent. And as a part of that, because the user agent needs to act in an interoperable way, that's how the formation of W3C formed. So my final question to you guys is, if this is a shared responsibility between us, where do you think that wallet developers and dApp developers should be participating, and where are you guys participating in order to help with this?
I'm advocating for stronger responsibility from the agents.
Okay.
So I want to push the boundary where the agency is responsible for token behavior, as long as token behavior is correctly dictated by the issuer.
Yep.
Which means that we should collaborate in making a token standard.
Okay.
Where token behavior, how token talk to the website is defined. Not go backward where we define account standard or define IP address like key holding standard.
Okay. Benito, what about you?
I don't know. I find that to be a very challenging question.
That's all right.
To be honest, but I think that we should be collaborating on an infrastructure level as well, to just make sure that, again, we set the right foundations for both wallets and builders to have like a solid ground to step on.
Yep, I appreciate that. And this was a oddball question I just made up. I shared all the questions to them, so that's all right if they don't have an answer. Julian, what about you? You got a take? Or no?
I think I feel it's rounding up the conversation a little bit from where we started, which is I think that our contribution isn't orchestrating and integrating the interaction between the dApps and the wallets. Is we're providing the toolkit and the UX that actually allows people to modulate and make decisions about the level of risk they're happy to take as part of that interaction. So when going back to the Asian concept, like it's something that we had at Credo for a long time. That our policy engine we call it the signing agent. But what it's really saying is actually like we provide the modularity to provide a set of conditions under which transactions can be signed off on, and I think that toolkit, which is effectively like the risk management toolkit of anyone who actually wants to take the assets from a secure environment and deploy into let's call it a risk environment where you're trying to generate some kind of return. That's where we focus on efforts, right? Like let's give you the tools to actually do that in a way that is within your control.
Awesome. All right, well, that's what I have. Looks like we have 2 minutes to finish talk, and then we might have a few other questions. So I will pass the questions off to the audience. Does anybody have any questions based on some of the answers that we got here?
Excellent. So my question is...
Do you want to use the mic? Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So my question would be regarding MEV on non-PPS chains like Binance, Polygon, and so on. How do you guys think, which measures could wallets take to prevent front runs and bad types of MEV?
Yeah, this is a great question in terms of like a specific attack. This is something where the question then becomes, because I've seen some wallets doing this, I've seen some dApps doing this. So then I think to you all, the question would be, is this something that you guys view as your responsibility as infrastructure providers or wallet providers? Or is this something where you...
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
We basically, in the case of Empire, we use Flashbots for from-chain protection.
That is for Ethereum, about other chains.
Well, Empire is currently an EVM chain wallet only, so I'm afraid I can't answer the question.
Yep. Weeba, do you have an answer? Or?
Same thing.
Okay. Awesome. I saw one other question over here. Yeah.
Oh,
Hi. You were discussing earlier that the responsibility for security should be shared between dApps and wallets, but in my opinion, that would work only when both parties are not malicious. So, what do you think? Shouldn't the responsibility of saving the user's asset be pretty much on the wallet side, because it should consider that all the dApps that users are interacting are malicious pretty much?
I love you. I totally support that view. I think it's not only a shared advantage, a shared responsibility. It's mostly wallets' responsibility. I think wallets should take care of tokens, know what token is doing, what transaction means, and even generate transactions. I think it's possible through new technology, through giving the token issuers a power to instruct how to protect their tokens by having a framework between wallet and token issuer. We are working exactly on that front, and we have some product technology for that.
Julian?
I think just for the sake of controversy, might as well. I think there's an element of if you start making the assumption that either one of the parties is acting maliciously, I think you're sort of addressing more of kind of tail risk, right? And I think we can't start by assuming that basically the parties involved are malicious to start with. So for me, that's
I would argue that the tail risk is as big as the security problem at hand. If security problem is big, then the tail risk will grow and it's the head. If the security problem is weak, it's actually a tail.
Yeah, but then, so what I was going to say though is that there's an element of, if you're deploying your assets into a dApp, and then the assumption that what we're debating here is, and if the dApp is basically run by malicious actors, is it the wallet's responsibility to secure against this? I think it's a tricky question, because to be perfectly honest, this is also crypto, this is very much caveat emptor. We are providing the pipes for you guys to deploy your assets. I think that there is tons of work that is done up front, incidentally, by the wallet providers. A huge amount of work that's done up front as well by the custodians to actually make sure that an evidently malicious actor isn't something that we want to expose our users to, but it's an easy thing, I think, to figure out in hindsight. There is nevertheless this kind of sense of, well, you know, at the end of the day, like, people actually are choosing to take the risk as well when it comes to deploying their assets. So I think that what we're trying to guard against as much as possible and embed in the UX is risk against error, right? Like, you know, you didn't want to actually send your assets to that dApp in the first place. Like, all the kind of whitelisting capabilities and all that stuff, that is embedded in what we're offering. That is also what AA is actually going to deliver when it's actually rolled out. But then the question of, and we couldn't actually make this an argument about, I don't know, FTX. Why not? We haven't actually brought them up today. But so, you know, the notion of guarding against maliciousness as systematic guardrail is tricky in a world where, like, there is an element of risk associated with investment decisions that we're trying to support our users in making.
I was going to say, Vanina, do you want to?
No, I actually completely agree with you. What you mean?
I hold a rather opposite view, but let me be the editor. So the fact that you have to trust the dApp to not misuse your token is a condition to use that website is detrimental. Because that limits competition. Because that means that you only go to OpenSea and go to a few trusted websites to do a transaction. Imagine you have a line of credit offered by AAVE and you can use it on any e-commerce website. And you can only trust Amazon or a few reputable e-commerce websites to correctly withdraw your available credits. Then you go back to where it was. I think blockchain enables freedom by allowing more parties to compete. And that was done by having better security, not worse.
Yeah.
And I feel this is going to be one we should get the bar and, like, really hash it out. Like, I think there's also, like, you want to assume that there's rational actors behaving in the economy in which you're participating, right? So the notion that I mean, what I'm saying is, like, what is the propensity of anyone to actually running a dApp to actually do this maliciously as opposed to actually running scaling a business in earnest? I think that the malicious angle, and I feel like we've been contradicted quite a bit last year yet again, but is, especially over time, is meant to be the tail risk, right?
Yeah, and I'll answer this question because I see we're at time, but I'll answer this question from the browser perspective to offer, like, a different insight with this. Within the browser, traditionally we treat websites as if they're sandboxed in terms of their frame, as it's referred to. And the frame is determined specifically based upon the origin. These are very browser-specific terms, but the way to think about that is you've got a sandbox per tab, and each tab is sandboxed based upon the URL in the URL bar. So what becomes very interesting with contracts is because they operate in an open manner, can you actually sandbox a smart contract? And so with that, that's where you introduce the question of, like, can it be total responsibility to the wallet if it's something where you know, the user has chose to consent to it, and all we can actually do is warn them, hey, this looks malicious, but we're not necessarily certain.
Yeah. And so the policy engines limit that risk, by the way, today. It's not just whitelisting. You can also have sort of, you know, you can pull the plug on the wallets that, so the assets that are exposed to those dApps if there's any behavior that is identified as being suspicious. So there's risk management there that actually would, like, go a long way to actually addressing this. I think, like, what I'm just trying to wrap my head around is the 100% foolproof approach to the malicious actor is, you know, if you've got an answer, I definitely want to implement it.
There's no idea of sandboxing a smart contract work like this. You ask me to withdraw the line of credit. Why are you asking? Why are you trying to access my CryptoKitty contract? So that is the idea of sandboxing smart contract. I think it's not sufficient because smart contract is only half of the token. The other half of the token is how the transaction generated, how you dress your CryptoKitty, how you let someone to use your ape, or how you let someone drive your car. So in the end, you have to sandbox the code accessing the smart contract as well as the contract together. And then you enter a dangerous area where you want to build multi-domain websites, where the source code comes from different vendors. On the surface, this is bad security model, it won't work. But if somebody make it work to extend, it will free market power that drives security to increase for this kind of behavior. So I think we envision a multi-domain website, and it will come.
Awesome. Well, with that, I will call it. Clearly, we've had a bit of difference of opinion here, but that's what I was put up here for, was to try and frame it in that way. So I'm glad that we managed to get that, and I'm glad that we had such a diverse set of opinions up here, and such great questions from the audience. Thank you guys both. So thanks.